What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. My name is Braden Carlson.
My name is Taylor.
My name is Shane, or as you might know me, Postar.
Now, the people who are just listening aren't going to know if Matt's here or not. He's not.
Assume Matt's not here until we say otherwise.
Yeah, it's just the safest bet is to think that he won't be. But yeah, hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I have great news, actually. Nigel's here. What's up, Nigel? Oh, man, he's vocal today.
He's about it.
Yeah, he's been living in the basement, so he's a little hot with it.
Oh, he's on edge. He's like, dude, what's going on right now? I used to have this whole house to myself, and now he's cooped up in the basement. Maybe people buying his stickers will make him happy from rocketvlogs.square.site. Anyway, I complained enough about the Riverside thing. Oh, wow. Well, that's convenient. Riverside has upgraded me for free to the plan that now includes 1080p streaming with no watermark. So if you were for the live stream last week when I gave it like a crazy clickbait title, like "This is terrible" or something like that, it was because they quote unquote added a feature that took things away that I already had and then put them behind a paywall, even though I paid for an entire year up front. So
boo.
Shout out Riverside. Anyway, today we are talking about things you shouldn't be doing at a rocket launch, or maybe things that are fine for you to do, but some people might think that you shouldn't. This topic comes from a tale that Taylor recently encountered. So, Taylor, you want to explain to the nice people what happened?
It's actually as old as time, but we recently had a good run-in at the last launch, which was NSL West in Alamosa. So I finally get to go launch my minimum diameter rocket, and I go to RSO it. All my I's are dotted and T's are crossed, so to speak. And they're looking over the rocket, and then we get to the, what are the, you're doing twisting the wires together. And then someone comes up and goes, I hate that.
I hate that. Yeah, I was standing there for it. It was,
and then the RSO said, what did he say? Like,
he said, "Yeah, me too," or "I'm not a fan of it either," or something.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
I'm not a fan either, or whatever. I'm like, okay, and then proceeds to sign the card. So, but
what's funny is I had the same one, I believe, and he didn't say anything about. But to be fair, though, Taylor, your rocket did come in ballistic because your electronics didn't work, right? Oh
no,
wait, no. What's it that happened? It went Mach 2 and 41,000 feet, fine, and all the electronics worked?
It worked, huh?
Oh, you're right. Both of the electronics did work. Yes, you're right.
Oh, well, that is interesting, isn't it?
I'd like to point out that, and this was just, I've done it in the past, and so it was something I just found out by trying it, and it just was fine. But I twist my wires together, and then because I'm not a fan of the tucking of wires because it makes disarming not great. So I just twist, and then you leave just the tiniest bit sticking out. And so the actual like copper wire is just hanging out of the rocket, and it is fine. So
that's what I did
for any of the twisting wire haters out there, the rocket went Mach 2 and 40,000 feet, and they were still twisted when I picked it up. It beeps out at me.
I think theoretically my M1675 went even faster than that, right? It was like Mach 2.24 sim, something like that.
Yeah.
And all of the paint melted off the nose cone, and, all of the paint melted off the rocket, and the wires are still twisted together, and all the electronics worked. Funny how that works, I guess. But, yeah, so turns out it's fine. But it did inspire us to want to go down this avenue a little bit of sort of things that people think aren't acceptable in rocketry, or kind of unhinged things that people think is acceptable in rocketry and definitely shouldn't be happening. particularly, we kind of went with the theme of like what might get you shot down at the RSO table because of Taylor's story, but we can expand
or
on
just
it a little bit more.
or just the there's a lot of RSOs like what happened to me where you get to they like to share their opinion, I guess, or dissatisfaction with your rocket, but they know it's technically okay and there's or completely okay, but they just don't like it and they want to tell you about that.
I think you mean their infinite wisdom, Taylor.
Oh, you're right. And I sorry,
Nigel's just cutting through the camera there.
Yeah. Just right in the middle of everything. And also I have been RSO quite a bit, so I could share my experience with RSOing other people's rockets and what I like to do on that front as well.
Yeah, I don't think I really have any RSO issues outside of the same thing. Obviously, people not being a fan of twist and tape, and yeah, I think there's an important distinction to be made there. Like you said, that you don't tuck it into the hole because you can't turn it off. But it is funny that in one of my videos, I was like, Taylor doesn't even tape them, and somebody asked me about that in person. And they were like, "What do you?" So he just twists them together. I'm like, well, the tape comes off instantly, right? So it's it's only good for holding it there while it's on the pad, and that's not going to do you a whole lot when you need the electronics to work 40,000 feet up. So, yeah, use the switch if you want to, but you got to stop berating people for not using a switch just because.
Yeah, well, it's just like I'm not going to make fun of people or complain at people or whatever. Nigel's just wrecking everything here.
He's really going for it today.
But I'm not going to make snarky comments at you for liking switches because I understand that people like switches. And there's now I guess the asterisk there would be if it's like a Radio Shack style switch. I'm maybe say that those aren't the greatest.
Dude,
the old slide switch, yeah,
the huge red button that's on that sled we gave you with the high L on it.
Yeah,
that's probably so awesome. Work. I mean, yeah, it should be fine, right? Because it's a 2-position button. But yeah, I mean, if you do whatever you want to do with the electronics, but the point here is, don't try and shut people down for what they did if it's fully functional. And I know that we can prove it over and over and over again. Our 185-pound rocket flew with the same 3-inch sled that goes in Taylor's 3-inch Punisher with 2 strataluggers, electrical tape, 9 volts, and twist and tape. But somebody's still
sliding around on one piece of all thread.
Oh yeah, that's still not my favorite thing, I'll say. But Taylor likes to let it just get all loose with it. It's fine.
I mean, it doesn't move up and down. It can just, with the wires, it really can't twist either. But
get a little spinny with it.
It could, technically, yes.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't yet, I guess. So
yeah, it probably won't.
I mean, I haven't had a problem yet. So.
Dude, famous last words. Knock on some wood.
Yeah. So, what are some things that you guys? What are some? Have you guys had any instances or run-ins with RSOs, or maybe just people in general that are will make comments about your rockets?
Posar has a good one actually from his level 1 flight.
Yeah. I think it was the flight after my level 1, but Formula 75, and there's no paint on it. It's orange glass, so you can see through it. But I had the chute packed, and there was probably like 3 or 4 inches of shroud line sticking out, like not packed into the chute. And so when I took it up to get RSO'd, he wasn't a fan of them sticking out, even though there was a bunch of dog barf in there.
Dude, like 4 inches of dog barf.
Yeah.
So was he looking through the translucent glass or what?
Yes. Yeah. And he made me repack the chute. And
he sure was like, he's like, I pack man-rated chutes. Trust me, those are going to burn. Oh, you're right. It was the H550 because I was like, he
Yeah.
literally just flew this rocket an hour ago.
Yeah. So yeah, I had to
That's
repackage.
crazy.
Well, he
Yeah,
had to
and he's like,
repackage
take it
it
out,
for
take it out.
me.
I'll show you how to do it. And then
Yeah.
like when he packed it, there was still some sticking out. And he's like, see, you gotta get as much as you can. We're like, all right, man. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've had, well, my first Polecat Nike Smoke got destroyed because I decided to listen to somebody that, had more expertise than me, quote unquote. Even though that rocket had flown on a K and an L in the past with full recovery, the electronics worked, I'll say. He was like looking at my ejection charges with the glove tips, and he's like, "Oh, you don't want to do that. You got to use these, the centrifuge tubes." And then I was like, "Well, these charges aren't big enough." He's like, "Trust me, it's gonna be like they're so contained in there, it's gonna work great." And then my rocket came in ballistic. So yeah, that was an interesting. It wasn't even an RSO either. It was just a dude who saw an 18-year-old. I was like, wow, I got to teach this kid how to do rocketry, even though I've seen
Yeah.
him do it here for years. But, whatever. I'll be honest with you guys. AAA Idaho, like Shane knows this, AAA Idaho doesn't really RSO. So, I mean, everybody just kind of knows everybody.
Yeah.
If it's something really sketchy, they'll be like, okay, hold on. But if it's just like a normal rocket, nobody really checks anything unless it's like for a cert flight. So,
I think you mean they always check.
well,
Right.
they always check somebody new or if the rocket's suspicious. But
Yeah.
I'll say they just give a quick glance of your rocket. Someone's always at the table that you walk by, and you go, "Oh, I got this Sky K550."
Oh,
in here."
okay.
And they're like, "Okay, sounds good."
Yeah.
I thought you meant there was literally no RSO.
Oh
Oh.
no, it's not like people just you just show up and throw stuff on the pad.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, maybe that's not so cool to announce, but I see what you mean.
Yeah. It's not like a
yeah,
lawless
that's sort of like how it
wasteland,
is at
but
Cloudbusters. If it's like a fun fly, I go up there. Or actually, even if like one of the Cloudbusters is like running the RSO at Airfest or something, like they know my rockets and will just like this rocket's flown 1,000 times. I'm going to sign the card.
right. Yeah, I'm trying to think. When I flew my Big Daddy at Airfest, the guy who RSO'd it didn't love the friction fit, which is like another topic that's identical to the twist and tape thing, right? Ask Taylor when I friction fit a 98 millimeter motor case into my V2. Ask Taylor
Well, that was a
how
joint
good of
effort,
a job I
to be
did.
fair.
Yeah. Well, how good did we do?
So good.
Maybe
need
a little
two
too
trees.
good.
And it come along in like 3 hours?
Yeah, 3 hours of actual, not counting the hours that we put in with hammers and stuff before that.
Yeah. Yeah. So believe me, we can friction fit a motor case. We did the one that Big Daddy too. And that was the one that the guy was like really hesitant about. And then when I got it back, I almost couldn't get the case back out.
Yeah, really, friction fit, if you do it right, the problem is going to be getting the motor out.
Yeah.
It's not going to come out.
Yeah, especially it's but
well,
yeah,
I mean, it's not going to come out during the flight, and possibly will not come out after recovery also.
right.
Yeah.
That's yes.
But
That's, there's a lot of like old school things that could kind of be applied to the same. It's, I think, really just a victim of a lot of newer age rocket people being RSOs and volunteering, which is great that they're volunteering, but
yes,
they're just not familiar with.
well, part of the problem is there's just not a lot of guidance on like being RSO, I guess.
Right.
It's like, well, you're level 2 and you got to check people's rockets, but then it's like some people are just really power hungry and really want to like find stuff wrong with people's rockets that there's really nothing wrong. And I guess that's mostly what we're talking about here. But there's other people that are doing an honest job. They're just like probably overanalyzing things that don't really matter. It's like the friction fit thing. Like like when I'm RSO, I'll tell people like if their nose cone's a little loose, or like to my what I would say, especially like a motor deploy rocket, because or like your drogue separation point if they aren't using shear pins or whatever. It's not really going to be that big of an issue. I'm like, it could drag separate. I would probably add a piece of tape, but really it's up to you. Like, it's your rocket. You make that call, because that's not really gonna. My job is to make sure the rocket's safe and it's not going to hurt anybody. If it drag separates, it's like, unless it's a rocket that's clearly going to go above Mach or something, which in case you're probably using shear pins anyway, the rockets would probably zipper and come down on the range.
Mostly be
so
fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories in particular about tape and nose cones as an RSO, Taylor? Or anything like that?
I was RSOing at LDRS in Bonneville, and that exact scenario happened, and the guy's like, "Oh, okay," and a lot of times there's even a roll of tape on the RSO table. I can't remember if there was it on that instance or not, but off he goes. He because I didn't reach. I said, you might want to, before you go out to the pad, you might want to add a piece of tape there or something. And he goes, "Oh, cool, thanks." Well, he comes back 30 minutes later, whatever, after the rocket had flown, and he comes back and screams at me that was it his son or his, or maybe it was just
like his brother, I think.
Brother or something. I don't remember the relation, but anyway, it was like he was helping this other guy fly his rocket or flying it for him or something. I don't remember what the deal was, but he came back screaming at me saying that he had flown the rocket 7 times, and this time is the only time the parachute didn't come out, and it went into the ground because I told him to put tape on his nose cone. And I'm like,
frankly, you're a monster, Taylor.
Yeah.
Terrible person.
It probably wasn't too long of a delay or an injection charge issue or
so here's one that
a million different other things. Electronics failure, motor problem. I don't know. Could have been like a lot of different things. I very highly doubt that it was, unless he just put tape, he actually taped the nose cone on. Which, by the way, as an RSO, I've seen that, which scares me. But I'm like, if you've done this before, the shear tape. I don't know how that works.
That might be one of those old school things that could probably just go away. But maybe we're just in the wrong on that one. Maybe
I say, tape have you done this before? They say,
tape.
"Oh yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years." Okay, you look like someone that's done that for 20 years. I'll let you do it. Nigel, again, in front of the camera.
That's exactly the thing, though, right? Because if I was RSOing and I saw that, like, I know that is a thing that people do. So I would ask the same question sending along, not standing and be like, "Oh, geez, sheesh, man. Well, I really wish you would consider shear pins. I really wish you would. I hate that."
Or, man, friction fit really gets some people all twisted up.
Yeah.
Or for motor retention, friction fit motor, like what's your motor retention? And you say friction fit, and they go, "Oh,
dude, it was actually not."
I really hate that. I'm telling you, I really do not like that. And I guess I'll let it fly this. There's always a lot of I'll let it fly this once. But I'm like,
right. Don't bring this back to me like this again.
Yeah, there's this idea that friction fit is like just totally won't work, which, I mean, I get it. If you do it wrong, yeah. But like, pull on the person's motor. That's what I do. Yeah, if someone's friction fitted, and I'll yank on it, because that's kind of the rule. If I can get it to move at all without a stick from the forward end of the motor, then yeah, it's probably too loose.
Then it's a problem. Yeah, and
and I think I have done that to people actually, but
at NSL, it was like specifically in the rules that you could not use friction fit. So my 54 was friction fit, but I put a piece of aluminum tape around the tail of the rocket and onto the closure. And that's I've done that a lot with minimum diameter stuff. It's a thing that people do. I call it my custom fabricated aluminum motor retainer because it's funny to me. And he didn't even ask about it, but like that rocket burned through the nozzle and spun like 50 times. If it like ripped the shear pins and flung the electronics bay off the top, and I feel like some of those violent pulls at the other end, if it was going to come out, it would have come out. Like an injection charge is never going to do that. And we had to use a piece of PVC pipe and a hammer to get the case back out. So, yeah, I don't know. We're kind of just dwindling on the stop yelling at us for friction fitting and twisting and taping things. But so we can
it just
move
comes
on.
up so much. They're so common.
I say we move on to things that like specifically we think people should stop doing from either end of the spectrum, right? And I can start because I have one recently that also came up again at a launch that I was recently at, that we won't throw anything out without using any names, but stop using the motor's average thrust to determine its thrust to weight.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
I understand that that's like the general rule of thumb, but I had people telling me that my N1000 rocket, the rocket weighs 7.5 pounds. I had people telling me that the rocket was going to be too heavy because it was like low 4-to-1 thrust to weight if you used the 1000 average. And I was like, 95% of the weight that I put in there for the takeoff weight is the motor. That is the motor. It has an initial thrust of 550 pounds and the rocket weighs 8. Like, just a little bit of thought needs to go into this, right? And there was a person who was trying to do their level 3 at LDRS with, I don't know how to say this without it being obvious who I'm talking about. And listen, if you're listening to this or somehow it gets to you, you're a great guy. I've interacted with you a lot. But personally, if I was the tap making this call, I wouldn't have shut it down. It was a heavy rocket. It was an M1939, which also has a really gnarly kick at the beginning. And it was
also, look at rocket videos from the 90s. The M1939 was used. It was just any giant rocket. You're like, that's the biggest we can get. And it pretty much worked. I mean, we've seen like 100-pound rockets loaded fly on M1939s.
Yeah, I mean, like Vern Hogue flew his 3/4 scale Patriot on an M2200. That thing weighed like 115 pounds, and that's on an M1939. The M1939 has an initial thrust of 400, and then it progresses to like 475, and then tapers off. And this rocket using 1939 newtons as an average was like 3.98 to 1, which I understand sounds scary for a huge rocket.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not even really a rule of thumb. It's just people doing the math incorrectly because, I mean, it can be a rule of thumb if you know what a rocket generally likes for an average thrust. Like, I have some of that. Like, this rocket doesn't really like below a 400 average thrust or whatever, but still, it's just you need to look at the thrust curve.
Yeah,
so what the initial thrust is.
If you are an RSO or somebody that is going to greenlight a flight, whether or not it's allowed, be a little more subjective about the weight of the rocket versus the initial thrust and not the average thrust, especially with long burn motors. The N1000 thing still like irritates me to this day. I'm like, are you kidding me, man? It's like, it needs like, it shows the max takeoff weight's like 32 pounds. I'm like, the motor weighs 28.
I totally forgot about this. I was trying to remember because I remember the interaction, but I couldn't remember the reason. But it was exactly this situation. It was at probably LDRS the last time it was in Argonia, and this guy was just giving me like he didn't want to let me fly because it was pretty windy. I think, in the teens, well into the teens. But I was flying my 3-inch Punisher on a K375. And he was saying that because of using the average thrust that was no good. It was too windy for that motor with how much the rocket weighed loaded or whatever. I'm like, this motor has 300 pounds of thrust off the pad. Like, it's going to pull 20 Gs. It's
Right.
good. And we went back and forth for a long time, and finally he's like, well, I guess we'll see, but angle it away from. I'm like, okay, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That is like long burns, dual thrust motors. These are things that you really need to kind of have in your back pocket, just the knowledge of what motor
Yeah.
you're listening or discussing at the point. Because, yeah, like N1000 or the K375 or K455, whatever, it's they're a lot more than it just says with that average thrust,
Or
you know?
yeah, or even like an M650.
Right. Just don't let anybody fly a 7.5-inch Honest John with 4J motors around it on just an M650, because you're right, that is not a good call. It was like 5.1 to 1 with the initial spike and like under 3 with just the motor. So when it started lighting first, I was like, no way, this is like my worst nightmare ever. I just lit a Moonburner M before 438mm Js. It all worked out fine on that flight.
Yeah.
Posar, do you have any recommendations on either side of that table?
Not that I can think of at the moment, unfortunately.
So this one is like, it cuts a little deeper than like on field preparation, but like before you build a rocket, maybe if you never have before, just kind of like take a second, even just 1 second, to look at a rocket that's built and maybe, try to emulate that to some extent. We've seen quite a few rockets that show up where, like, especially fillets, that seems to be the thing that people really struggle with. So this is coming from the RSO's perspective, is you got to understand if your rocket looks like, say, for no reason particular, that you poured glue down the fins to create your fillets, and maybe, glued your motor case in. Not that I've ever seen this, of course. This would never happen. Maybe take a sec to like step back and be like, oh, well, I guess if I want to fly the rocket again, I shouldn't glue the motor case in, or
The mooter.
mooter. What's weird is all these people's rockets with fillets don't have giant strands of glue running down the fillets. So, understand that if your rocket looks extremely questionable, there are going to be an extreme amount of questions associated with it.
I wonder if that was what if it ran the other way? Like he didn't understand, did the Macho Matt and tried to
Like
use
he
some
turned it before it
unthickened
was dry.
unthickened epoxy and then turned it, and then it all ran down.
There was no beads at the end, though, like on the edge of the fin, like no wipe marks. It really looked, in theory, if anybody had ever done this, not that we've ever seen this,
Yeah.
of course, it really would have maybe just looked like they kind of just poured some glue down the fin.
Something that bothers me, but I can't really say don't do it because like it is a good thing, I guess, but it's kind of just like a common sense thing for if you are like qualified to be in this position. But as an RSO, when you're like, we can just look at a rocket, right, and tell if if it's stable, pretty much. I mean, and if it's close, that's when you start asking questions like, "Oh, this is an odd rock," or "Why are those fins so small?" But it's like at bringing up a rocket that I've clearly flown 30 times. Like that's the only way this rocket would ever look this way, and then asking where my CP and CG are, and I'm like, I mean, I get it. Like you're trying to make sure I know that my rocket is stable, so I can't really be too upset about that, but also like we don't need to grill me on it. If it's like a clear, like a, I don't have a Patriot, but say you brought up a Patriot, you know that's a stable rocket. There's no configuration where that would not be stable, pretty much.
Right.
Um,
So you're suggesting RSOs have a decent understanding of rockets before deciding if rockets should be allowed to fly?
yeah, I don't know. I've ran into a lot of people where I'm like, have you ever flown? When like, I know you have to be level 2 to be RSO, but what's the biggest rocket you've flown in the last decade? I don't know.
Yeah, Taylor's throwing mad shade.
Also, on the other end of that, if you are someone that's going to get your rocket checked at the RSO, if it's not marked on your rocket, have some idea where that CP is so you can be ready to fire back when the inevitable question hits. Luckily, I haven't had a situation where people want me to go pull out documentation because usually I have a general idea where the center of pressure is, so I can be like, yeah, it's right about here, and we balance it and go, okay, yeah, that should be good, and it's like, okay. But there's also been situations where it's like, yeah, I guess the whole rule of thumb of you need 2 caliber stability, that's caused some problems too, because like that's just a rule of thumb, and plenty of rockets are stable with much less than that. And so there's been some pushback on, oh, this rocket's not going to be stable or whatever. It's like, well, it's the center of gravity is still in front of the center of pressure, so it is stable. And I guess that just comes down to experience. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, we're not trying to discourage anybody from volunteering, but it's best that, like, maybe if you're not confident in well, I guess that's kind of the problem, is a lot of people are really confident in it and they probably shouldn't be in a lot of cases. If you don't really
I have no
like
problem with the people that are like kind of really have an open mind and stuff. It's I'm definitely not hating on volunteers, and I appreciate it. And the people that are so mostly are good, but it's like when you run into the bad ones, it really sticks with you, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, like, I hate that. That'll really stick around for a while. Yeah,
also,
I don't know.
like, yeah, I don't need to hear comments that don't pertain to the safety of my rocket. Like, I don't need
yes
to
or
hear
no,
that you
honestly,
don't like whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't
when
do this.
I RSO rockets, I see lots of stuff I don't like, but it's not going to make the rocket fly not safely or, whatever. I'm going to keep it to myself and maybe tell Braden about it later.
Yeah. Yeah, do the right thing. Talk your S behind everyone's back. Well, I think on that note, we should bring it out to the mailbag. We got some input from the fine folks of Patreon. So I said, what are things you've seen RSO call into question a rocket launch? Did you agree or disagree? If you were an RSO, what are the things you would shut down a flight for? And is there an RSO requirement you think is incorrect and should be overturned? There's one in here. I don't usually pre-read these, but there's one in here that I'm going to go ahead and leave the person's name out of it because I personally feel they are on the wrong end of the argument on that one. So we'll get to that one last because it's I'm curious to see what you guys think of it. But first and foremost, man, I'm on one with the talking today. Our friend Neutronium, who just had a tragic attempt at the M altitude record with his M2245. Our condolences. Did you see that, Taylor, on the Rocketry
I didn't
forum?
know it flew.
Yeah, he flew it at Mud Rock at Black Rock this past weekend. And he found the nose cone intact and the fin can separate, came in ballistic, and one of the aluminum fins was bent. So he's still trying to figure that out. But my theory, I don't know, my theory initially was that the nose cone like folded and hit the fin on the way down. I feel like at like Mach 3 or whatever, if the nose cone hit the fin, the nose cone would have taken some damage.
The nose cone was undamaged.
It looks pretty good in the pictures. Yeah, both ends of the
Was
rocket
it-
except for the one
how
bent
was it-
fin.
How was the coupler attached to the motor?
I don't know actually. I mean, it's in the thread. I don't know off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but I'm pretty sure it was just attached to the forward closure with the bolts, like the threads in the forward closure. Anyway, a valiant effort. It was a good try, and he says he's going to try again. I, above all else, wish you the best of luck finding another M2245.
Yeah.
Honestly. We're all crossing our fingers that the TMT testing on that Aerotech 75-10-240 load just comes in a little soft and we get a full M. All the altitude people are just like, please, just like 10 less Newton seconds.
I think it will because it's always higher at Aerotech because of the altitude.
Yeah.
True.
Well, anyway, Neutronium says for 38mm CTI motors, RSOs should always ask if the flyer installed the motor into a case. Do you remember this epidemic, Taylor?
Oh, yeah.
People were like, they thought they were single-use motors.
I actually caught someone do it once, but it was like, you know, really like new. He was his level 1 or something, and he was naive, and I was like really happy that we were both happy about, because he's like, what? I just don't know, or maybe I've noticed something rattling around through the retainer or something. And I was like, what? But I'm like, he's like, someone noticed that the motor was real like wiggly in there, and was like asking about it. And then I'm like, your motor's not in a case. He's like, oh, is that a problem? Yeah, it's a big problem.
Big one, actually. Yeah.
He's like, thank you so much. And then he came back later and got his level 1. So it was a happy story all around.
Yeah, it was crazy. But for those who aren't familiar, if you've never flown a CTI motor, it's like a fully encased assembly with the 38s. You don't have to buy closures with the case or anything. It's part of the motor. You just put it in, thread it, and you're done. So especially now it can be confusing to new people with DMS motors, because DMS motors are single use, and a CTI 38 without the case on it looks very similar. So it kind of went away. It was like an early thing. I feel there was quite a few instances of it, and then it kind of tapered
probably
off.
because people remembered single use motors, and it's like, oh, this looks like it, because it's like it's basically just a motor that needs a case that's fully assembled. So,
and now I think because of DMS motors, it may have had a little bit of a recent comeback.
Huh. So
yeah, if you're flying a CTI 38mm motor and it's not silver when you put it in the rocket, there's an issue you should address there. Yeah. Posar, have you heard of that phenomenon?
I hadn't. I wasn't aware that happened.
It's quite the show if someone makes it to the pad with it, like because it just instantly bursts into flames.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Unsurprising.
Kevin Rulin says, mostly it's the shake it by the nose cone test that I fail. Never had a drag separation with or without an extra tight coupler, but if that gets me through, I'll slap some tape on it and we both can be happy. That's a good outlook, honestly. That is one part of it. I mean, that's what happened with Taylor's guy, that he destroyed his rocket, and Taylor's a piece of S, and we all should acknowledge that.
But I will say, I did not do the thing where I stand there and go, once you put a piece of tape on it, then you can pass.
Yeah. And, you know, if it's something that's like, you know, isn't going to affect anything, and the RSO is just going to be stringent about it, it's not really worth standing there and arguing. But if you like standing there and arguing, I guess let her rip.
Yeah, it's really not worth it. They're just trying to make sure things are safe, so you can't.
Like we said,
I don't know.
Move on and talk your ass behind their back to your
Yeah,
just like everybody does. Dude, we give great advice on this podcast.
Man, the RSO was grilling me like crazy, dude.
It does happen. Chris the Rocketry Nerd says, I haven't looked at the other comments yet, but I have seen RSOs take issue with nose cones they think are too loose or too tight. That's so subjective, and without having witnessed a ground test RSO, it's really just making a wild guess. Taylor. I guess I get why it can be an issue, but really the RSO has to take the builder's word that it ground tested successfully in that exact configuration. Stuff that I definitely check for when doing RSO at my club is the CG and CP margin and fin integrity. Thrust to weight is obviously important too. Careful here. But at least my club people are way more likely to fly something 50-1 than 3-1, so I haven't had to bust anyone yet. Yeah, just, like we said, subjective. If it's a motor that has a high initial thrust, maybe stop and think about it for a second. That 3-1 average thrust. I'm gonna rant again. Here we go.
Yeah, a Braden rant,
dude. I'm gonna make a theme song for my own rants. You know what really got
Rocket
me?
rant.
When you're standing here and you tell me, "Oh, this thrust to weight ratio is not safe," because my N1000 rocket weighs 40 pounds. Okay, the motor is almost 30. I think the motor is 30. I don't know. We don't need to go down this path again. Or do we?
I will. So, a motor that gets a lot of hate, the J90. I had one for many years, and I finally had a rocket that I could. I finally had a rocket that was light enough that it would take a J90, and so I take it down to a fun fly in Argonia, and Lance RSOs me, and he goes, "Oh, J90." He's like, "I tried to fly one of these once at some other launch that we won't name," and he's like, they wouldn't let me fly it, and he told me the whole story, but it was just he was super mad. He was still super mad about it. That he's like, it has a good kick off the pad. It has 25-30 pounds of thrust off the pad. And I will say, I flew it in a 3-pound rocket, and it left the pad quite a bit quicker than I expected it to. So
that's fun. I have to say, the one time an RSO calling it into question for me that I was like, yeah, I see where you're coming from, was the Iris that me and Dave and Jay from Locke flew at Tripoli Vegas. Because it's a 7.5-inch diameter Iris that's fiberglass and it's 12 feet tall. I walked up there and like, what's in this? And I said a K850. And the guy was like, what? How much does it weigh? I was like, 17 pounds. And he's like, what? Is that possible? I was like, you can pick it up if you want. But that one, I was like, yeah, no, I get why you're concerned. That's it was so funny though. It went like 800 feet or something like that. Phenomenal. Richard Schubert, I believe is how you say his name, aka Bob. At LDRS, I saw a rocket with the fins attached with super glue. Okay, not a problem yet. When you held it up to the light, you can see quite a bit of daylight between the body and fin seams. That was the only rocket I didn't approve during my volunteer stint. Yeah, that's unideal, one might say. It sounds like that kind of implies that it didn't have fillets at all. And they just kind of surface mounted the fins with some super glue. I really hope that it was like an SS Alpha or something like that.
I mean, if it was like a gnome, I'd probably let it ride.
Yeah, there's a good chance if it's just flying on like a B or a C motor, it's going to be all right. But that's probably a problem you want to point out just to nip that in the bud in that person's rocketry career. Kind of send them off of that path if you can. But what can you do, All right. So I'm gonna go to this next one, and if you're listening to this podcast, person that left this comment, understand that I mean no harm here, but I am leaving your name out of it, though people on Patreon will be able to find it because it's public. He says, I once got dinged because I had the igniter loaded in an I-49, twisted for safety. Got pretty much yelled at until I showed him the paperwork that you have to build it that way because there's no core. I get it, not your usual situation, and he probably didn't know, but still, chill out. I'm not going to build a motor at the pad. Curious about your guys' thoughts on this one.
At least the igniter was stunted.
Shunted.
Yeah.
Shunted. That's the word. My bad.
Dude, it was doing kick flips on the art.
It was stunting on him.
Dude, he brought it up to the RSO table. It threw a double McTwist 1260 like Sean White. And just, it was crazy. Nobody could believe it.
Yes, at least it was stunted. Oh
Yeah,
man.
that one might stick around.
Yeah. You remember when people used to stunt every channel? There you have like 5 switches on the rocket, so every charge was stunted.
Oh yeah.
That was the wrong one. There we go. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, it's really not that hard to still put the igniter in at the pad. Just pop that rear closure off.
Yeah.
That motor in particular would actually be easier than the J615.
Yeah, definitely. That's the motor that I was going to point out too, because I've flown a
Yeah.
J615. So has Matt, and we took them suckers apart at the pad before we put the rocket on the rocket was on the rail. But yeah, I mean that's just kind of the nature of the beast. That rule is in place for good reason. And though I fairly adamantly am like, has anyone ever really static electricity ignited an igniter? An E-match makes more believable sense to some extent, but even then I'm like, has this ever happened? But like the resistance of a regular igniter, I'm like, that doesn't actually seem possible.
Yeah, probably not. But
But on the off chance that it is, it's just
Yeah,
not
it's more
great to
about-
be carrying a
more
rocket
about the
down.
principle.
Worth it.
Right. And I mean, it used to be really common practice to just like for C slot motors and stuff to just have the igniter in there while you were walking it up the RSO with G60 or G40s a lot. People did it a lot. You got to slam that copper head in there before you put the rear closure on. You're not going to get it through the nozzle. But yeah. So I'm going to side with the RSO on that one. But in a similar thing, I wish we had talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode. Everybody, listen to me. I'm going to look directly into the camera for this one. Get the Rant theme song playing. Hold on. Give myself a drum roll here. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm talking directly
Braden's
to
a
you.
rant. Braden's a rant. Braden's gonna rant. Okay.
Stop turning your electronics on at your table with charges hooked up to them, dude. People are just like,
Yeah,
all right,
I
just
swear.
gonna do a quick continuity test. I'm like, no,
I
don't
swear,
do that.
every launch we'll be talking, and then all of a sudden we hear beep 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 beep.
Yeah.
And then
It's
some guy
crazy.
going, okay, well I think everything is good. I'm like,
And
no, it's
how-
not good.
I feel like at least once every big event, or at least almost every big event, somebody has a charge go off on the pad, right? Now imagine that happens with the rocket laying down on the side pointed at Jim Bob next door with your
I've seen
3
someone
gram
put
charge.
I've seen someone put a nose cone through the top of their easy up.
Dude, it was crazy. There was at a launch that's very close to our house, we'll say, a bunch of college students, and I think they were all flying Dark Stars. Were they Dark Stars, Shane?
I think so.
And every single one of them set it up on the table, and there was like 4 at once that had the electronics fully armed and just beeping away with charges on them. Dude, I was like,
We walked away.
no way you cannot do that. Oh my god, dude, it's chaos. Well, we've reached the back half of the podcast. That's it for the mailbag. I'm gonna check the emails real quick, but while we're doing that, how about you guys talk about rocket projects you got coming in? What are you working on?
I mean, of course, the Nike Hercules, but that's on. That's a ways away. I'd say the
Dude, I forgot
we
how
all
long
know
that
the
thing's been.
status of that.
I forgot when we posted like teaser pictures of the Punisher parts. It was like in the background with the tail cone built and everything. I was like, wow, it has been a long time.
That's when I started it. Actually, that's when I stopped. Was when we started building the Punisher. And then I pretty much never touched it again. But except I did a little bit over the winter. I me and Matt are gonna build a new nose cone for the Arcus, I guess. So that's gonna be the next thing I got going on.
We kind of need one of them.
Yeah.
I have plans to build a 7.5-inch Nike Smoke, and I have centering rings and stuff and bulkheads cut and the parts to make it, but I am not in a huge hurry because I don't even have room for the rockets I have right now. And I know it can't fly at Airfest, so I thought it would be a good fall/winter project when I'm avoiding finishing the Hercules.
How's your M685 video coming?
Well, I just got my computer set up after the move, so
Yeah, barely in time to do the podcast.
Yeah.
The one time we actually like have a hard time that we kind of need to start recording for the live stream after this because it's going to be the first bonus podcast episode. Taylor's like, hold on, I'm setting up my computer. I was like, oh my
So
God.
the computer
Yes.
was fully set up, but I hadn't actually used it at all. And so for some reason there was like 20 like Google Chromes running in the background. And even when I tried to force quit it, they weren't closing and everything was just not working. It was just all froze up.
Huh.
Dude, Google Chrome eats RAM like no other. All right, well,
It
Posar,
does.
what do you got?
The big obvious one, the 5-inch Punisher, my L3.
He actually
I need-
actively emailed people, though, to make sure he's
I
good to
have.
start it.
Yeah, I have done that.
Hooray.
It's
All
gotta
right,
be
well,
done by balls.
you guys already know that I
Wait, you're
have
doing
a
it
million
balls?
things.
No.
No, but he's got a motor that he needs to fly at
I
balls.
got
now
something
that he's
else
level
for it.
3 for. They came today, dude. It's it was really funny to just talk about it, and then it got really real really fast.
Yeah.
And now there's just 2 of these motors that all of the people on Patreon and the channel membership know about. Hint, wink, bink,
Are you-
bink, you know what I'm saying?
Are you going to kill your 5-inch Punisher with it?
No.
No, it's
I'm going to build
take it.
another Punisher that the Patreon
No,
channel
Braden.
member
I'm
people
talking to
also know
Postar,
about.
Braden.
Oh, it's not going to die.
Nah, it'll take it.
Not everybody's a sissy weenie like you and needs to put tip-to-tip carbon on their 5-inch Punisher to try and make it survive. And everybody already knows that I've got 5 million projects going on all the time at once. I just started building a minimum diameter 4-inch tube fin rocket. It's really only minimum diameter by a consequence of it being super easy to build that way, and then you can just slide adapters in. But an M1939 will fit right in it. So someday, maybe.
You're building it minimum diameter?
Of course, an M1939 will fit in it.
You're never going to put a 4-inch motor in it.
Just for that, I'm going to for sure. I'm flying minimum diameter M1939 to 12,000 feet.
He won't.
All right, so we got 2 emails, actually. It's contact@aggpodcast.com if you want to send us an email, or you can actually send us a text message now if you're listening to this not on YouTube. Click the description. There's a link in there on Apple and Spotify and all that. You can send us a text. See, Nigel's excited about it. We have... I don't think that's a name. Hopefully it is just like a combination of the dude's or individual's name mashed up, and I'm not a piece of S for not knowing how to pronounce it. Braden, Taylor, Shane, and Matt. On your latest podcast, you mentioned how your shear pins and cardboard tubes don't work well. Here's a solution. Score the outline of 1 inch of the square in the coupler. Put a very thin layer of cardboard from within the square, or pull off, sorry. Cut 1 square inch of aluminum from a Diet DDP can. A regular scissors works easy. Soak the cardboard square with CA glue. Press the aluminum square into the recessed square. When hardened, drill the 256 hole through the body tube and through the metal square. Sand flat if needed. The shear pin will now smoothly slice through without damage to the cardboard. Ed. Okay, it was a combination of his name. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of different variations of this. Like brass people do a lot as well.
Yeah. I'm aware of it. I just feel it's unnecessary for at least any rocket I've had so far. There may be one in the future where I feel like it's needed with a lot of nose weight or something, but I guess we'll cross that path when I get there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't really come into the point where a cardboard rocket that I didn't fiberglass needed shear pins. So, and even the ones with glass don't use them except for
Yeah,
into the nose cone. But I mean, it
I
is a
don't have
great
them on any. I don't even do it in the nose cone.
if you want the security of the shear pin, then that is a great option. Oh yeah. Also, another project that Posar and I will be working on soon. Mini mags. There's
Oh
shout out to our
yeah.
friends at Lock
Oh,
Precision. Those come
yeah. I
tomorrow.
guess I got to figure out that on my end as well before
I found the
Airfest.
coupler. I still have to dig through my tubing collection.
Well,
Um.
hurry up.
Okay, so Jonathan Gabriel actually messaged and asked, LDRS was quite a washout this year, and I would like to hear your opinion on the people and the flights that did happen. Yeah, so that was actually the whole episode last week. Sorry, Jonathan, for getting to your question too late. But if you want to reach out to us via email, it's contact@hgpodcast.com. And I think that brings it to the end. Does anybody have anything else to say?
Nigel is really excited about the stickers
Okay.
and about the upcoming Punisher and Arcus flight at Airfest.
So is he excited about the shirts and stuff at rocketvlogs.com as well?
Oh, he is. Yes,
And
I think
not just the
he
stickers at
forgot to mention that.
rocketvlogs.square.site?
You're right. Yes, actually, he likes the shirts probably the most.
Oh, interesting.
Oh.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know. Maybe the fine folks will help appease Nigel's calls. But for now, my name is Braden Carlson. You can find me on YouTube at Rocket Vlogs. Please go follow me on TikTok. This is a new one, but I've got a whole bunch of new followers on TikTok, and my video, my K300, now has like 1.3 million views. So we're going to try and keep riding this out, and I'm trying to get to 10,000 followers on TikTok. And you can follow me on Instagram at BigB1011 as well. I guess it would help if I told you what my TikTok is. I don't really know what it is, so I'm going to let Taylor go while I look.
His TikTok is Rocket at
Yeah.
Rocket Vlogs. Just kidding, it's not. My name is Taylor. You can find me on YouTube at the Rocket Channel, and you can find Nigel here at my house.
Oh, true.
Oh yeah. My name is Shane or Postart. You can find me on YouTube at Postart Propulsions.
And my TikTok is at Braden Carlson 6. So you can find me over there. But we are the Anti-Gravity Group. This is the Anti-Gravity Group podcast, and we will see y'all next time.